Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with special guest, Whitney Jefferson Evans. And she's here today to share with us her new book, The Beginner's Guide to the Akashic Records, Understanding Your Soul's History and How to Read It. Now, have you heard your friends talking about the Akashic Records, but you don't even know what it is or even how to access it? Whitney's here to share simple tools on accessing your soul's library. Many of you know Whitney. She's a spiritual seeker. She spent the years of 2015 and 18 studying the energy healing modalities of Reiki, where she completed all 4 levels of training and eventually received the title of Reiki Master. She spends her free time learning about healing modalities and using herself as a test subject for the latest in wellness trends. Throughout her studies, she's received certificates in crystal Reiki, color psychology, and in her day job, she currently serves as Deputy Editorial Director and Director of Pop Culture at BuzzFeed. She's appeared on The Today Show, CNN, HLN, Nightline, Entertainment Tonight, Extra, and many more. She co-hosted BuzzFeed Radio and appeared on Watch What Happens Live. So let's welcome to the show, Whitney Jefferson Evans.
Thanks so much for having me, and hello.
Oh my goodness, I was so delighted when I saw this book, and it's filled with such great information. I have to ask you, why did you decide now was the time to write this book?
Good question. Well, it really feels like right now we're definitely at a turning point, I would say, for the planet and definitely humanity. I don't know how into following, energy flow of the planet or even just the astrological, what's going on in the skies, but it's been intense. It's been really energetic. There's been a lot of shifts. And so I actually, wrote this book earlier last year where we were talking about what's going to happen at the end of 2020 and 2021, and we're in it now. So it actually, the published date of the book, was almost divinely timed because I feel like now is the perfect time for this book.
Oh, without a doubt, because I think a lot of times, especially, we're all trying the best we can to keep each other safe, to stay safe ourselves, and we're a little bit sequestered than we normally would be. And so people are really doing that inward dive spiritually. And so it's interesting, when we talked about this, I had a basic understanding of the Akashic Records, and your book I found was really informative. And for our listeners that are just going, what are the Akashic Records? Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Absolutely. And it is very heady stuff, so bear with me. But basically, in the most simplest terms, the Akashic Records are an energetic vibrational record of everything that's ever happened in the past, present, and future.
Well, there you go, right?
You have to break that down a bit from there, but that's essentially, at its most basic, that's what they are.
So why is it important that we would even access those? Why is there an importance to that?
Well, some people will go through their entire lives and never hear of it or think of it, and they'll be fine and they won't need to. But those of us who are on a spiritual journey or even just doing the work, looking at our inner selves and trying to resolve trauma or kind of figure out why we are the way we are, it is the absolute perfect thing to look for, your Akashic reading. So I think it's the best time to do it would be now while we're all inside and have nothing better to do than to work on ourselves.
So when we talk about it has the past, present, future, does that include our past lives? Is it just this life? Does it hold information for us that would be beneficial for this life?
Absolutely. So it actually is technically holds the records of everyone's soul. So if you don't believe in past lives, this does have to do with past lives. I'm sorry. But basically, yes, you as a person are allowed to see your own soul's records. You're not allowed to peer in on anybody else's, they're private. You couldn't hack into someone else's records. It's very personal for your own soul. But yeah, that does include your previous lives, which if you haven't explored, past lives before or done a past life regression, it can be really, really beneficial. It'll bring up some things that you may not realize are you're carrying with you in this lifetime. So if you're really into past life regression or just hearing about it, Akashic Records, they pretty much go hand in hand. So I really recommend it.
So I know in your book you talk about that there's just this great history that comes with the Akashic Records, and I'd love for you to share that with us.
Absolutely. So the Akashic Records are actually fascinating because lots of different religions and texts over throughout history have all made reference to them. Some of them will refer to them in different terms. You can kind of look, there's actually a different verses from the Bible that I pulled into my book that reference a record, a book, this all-knowing book that has all of the information about our lives in it. And so it just really was fascinating to me as I was doing research for this book, how many different cultures made reference to this big all-knowing book that had all of this information in our lives. So to me, I do believe that they're all talking about the same Akashic Records that we now know what it is, this big all-knowing book. So I think it's really fascinating and how deep it's just entrenched in our history all across the world.
So do you feel that people, especially now during the pandemic, are looking at this going, you know what, even though this is ancient wisdom, it's something that really can benefit me on my journey today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the wisdom in it is of the past, the present, and the future. So in reality, the wisdom you can gain from it is kind of across all of those. I sound like I'm completely amazed by it, but it's because I am. So yeah, I mean, you could ask about things that were in your own personal past, your own previous lives that you don't, you have a question or why does this certain thing keep coming up? But you can also find out, what's going on in your future. Now, maybe people have had different experiences than I've never asked like what's going to happen on this day and time and, for really specific things, but I have asked for more general things. And it's, I think, really comforting, especially when you're in a place as we all are right now in 2021 in this world, global pandemic, a lot of times of uncertainty. It can give you the certainty you need to feel like, oh, I am on the right path, or this isn't the right path for me. So it's just a really fascinating and interesting tool to help you kind of along your way.
What was your first experience like with the Akashic Records?
Yes. My first experience was with, I have to laugh, but I don't know how your listeners feel about Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop, but I was actually on an assignment for BuzzFeed where I work to go check out one of her summits. So it was in Los Angeles, and I wasn't totally sure how I felt about it or what I wanted to see, but actually I saw that they were offering Akashic Record readings, and I had been interested in it for a long time, and I thought, okay, it's a work assignment that I can actually do some really cool spiritual work deep on myself. Like, how can I say no? So my actual first Akashic Record reading was at the Goop Summit with this wonderful reader named Amora Luz, who's just fascinating. And so, yeah, she sat right down with me and I had a very profound experience. I did not expect to be crying at the Gwyneth Paltrow Goop Summit, but it was just revolutionary. And so, yeah, that was my first experience.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that with us because that's really so profound. It's almost like you were meant to be there, and it's interesting because when we look at just the, how everything comes together with all these synchronicities. I mean, you had an interest in the Akashic Records, they're having a thing there. You're kind of like, I don't know about Goop or not, so, and it's interesting because I think a lot of people feel the same way. They're like, well, I'm a spiritual person, but I don't know exactly if this is something I believe until they have an experience.
Absolutely. And so I do go into my book and all the different many methods that you can get a reading done. For me, I think I really wanted to do it with another person that could guide me and kind of do the work for me. I really didn't know. I had Googled online. Thank goodness for YouTube. There's so many audio recordings and things that you can do to like learn deep things about yourself and, astral travel. And, they do have lots of Akashic Records recordings you could listen to. But for me, I just didn't feel confident enough in that or myself to be able to access it myself. So I also talk about that in the book, So for me, working with a professional really helped, I would say.
I think that's so empowering for so many people. I know in your book, you talk about, just the ease of getting in touch with your Akashic Records. And I was really surprised because I think sometimes people think this is like a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and it's not. So let me be the example. I really had, and I think lots of us do this. I mean, we could go into why I did this to myself if we wanted to. This could be a therapy session, but for some reason, I had this block up of I don't think I can access it. I'm not, spiritual enough, or I'm not like deep enough in my spiritual journey to be able to do this. I just felt like I can't do this. And I'm here to tell you, you can. It's actually very easy. So I do go in a lot of different ways in the book of how to get more comfortable with it and with yourself and the space, and really just preparing for it. Some people are so in tune that they could probably sit down and meditate and just reach them immediately, and props to them. I think a lot of us, it takes a lot of time to unwind, to slow down your brain, to fully focus on this intention. Setting intentions are so important. So yeah, I think with this book, I really want to just teach people that you can get there. And if it's not so easy for you, these are all the ways that you can do it.
So in your book, you talk about, just, protecting our space and cleaning our space. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I don't mean to sound too dramatic, but I really do believe the energy of your space is very impactful on our everyday lives. Anywhere from, it being dusty and you're in a room that doesn't have a lot of motion in it, so there's just stagnant energy, to maybe you had people over, or maybe not in COVID times, but, maybe you had some people over that you had an argument with, or are just not really great people, or they have bad energy and then it stayed. I do believe that energy should be cleared and refreshed as much as possible for kind of a clean slate. So I recommend that if you can do that in, any way that you feel attached to, you should do it. And it can be as simple as, clapping loudly in each corner of your room so that it just helps to break up the energy, to, doing a full ceremony with smoked herbs or sage, or, making a crystal grid, or even just cleaning everything out, dusting, cleaning. The act of cleaning actually is a huge refresh of your energy. So it doesn't have to be so dramatic, I would say. It can be very simple just to clean up and feel, at home in your energy of the room. And also you want to feel comfortable and happy and ready to connect. So if that means, your room's a little drafty because it's the winter time, you want to turn the heat up or have a blanket or sweatshirt on. Just simple things like that. Candles. Do you love candles? Light candles on. Does music make you relaxed? For me, yes. I listen to spa music and chakra music all the time. That would definitely help me to get into the mood, but maybe not for you. So I try to include as many different options of getting to there as possible, because I know we're not all the same in that way.
Yeah. There's so many different, they talk about if, the ocean salvation, there are many rivers that lead to it. So when you look at that, it's the same way with everything. So everyone has their own different path to getting to a place where they feel inner peace or feel comfort. But, I was so impressed with your book because, if we never cleaned our house, we would be a hot mess, so we have to do the same thing energetically,
I totally agree. And yeah, and so I definitely am a proponent for that, for even just yourself. Like, yes, your space in your home, but also yourself. And, you can cleanse your energy in many different ways. There's tons of methods. But one method is just, relaxing and having the intention that you're cleansing your energy. So it can be really simple, or it can be really ornate. I'll be honest, I generally am a little more ornate. I like to, lay down and put crystals on each corresponding chakra and light some sage and herbs and music and, make a whole ordeal out of it. But really it can be very, very simple, and it doesn't have to be so, I think, overwhelming or off-putting to people that they think, oh, I don't have the supplies, or I don't know how to do that. You don't need to. You just need to tune in with yourself, and that will guide you.
Thank goodness, right?
I know, right?
I get it. You get the right music, you get candles. It puts you in a vibe where you're just like, hey, I feel so, you get to this place where you just feel like you're almost humming, you feel empowered. And that's kind of where people want to be, Well, I was really surprised in your book, you talk about law of attraction. So how does that work with the Akashic Records?
Well, I think it can work in a lot of different ways. The law of attraction, I find it fascinating. But basically the idea is that once you kind of know what you want, and you could use the Akashic Records to help find that out if you're not sure. But basically you're putting up this information and getting it back to you. And how the law of attraction works. It's like attracts like. So basically you can use the Akashic Records to figure out maybe what exactly you want to attract and then attract it. Or if you already know, using the records to find out, either, healing trauma that may be related to it, or just why am I the way I am, or what are the blocks that are standing in the way of my goal? That's a huge question I like to tell people is a good thing to ask the records. Like, what are my blocks? Some of us don't know. And the answer might surprise you. I know people who found out that actually you have to deal with this thing in a previous lifetime, or something that they hadn't thought about for years or really suppressed. The answers you will get in these sessions may surprise you. And, usually they're huge light bulb moments. So it relates into the law of attraction of basically figuring out exactly what you want and attracting it back into your life.
Gosh, what a powerful question to ask. And it's interesting. We only get the answers to the level and the quality of the questions that we ask. So if we're leveling up our questions and asking something like that, we're really going to get some profound answers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Though I do want to note that some people will do a reading and they might not get the answers that they expect or in the way that they expect. And so I do tell people to be careful with your intentions because, if any of you have experience with intentions, you know that if it's vague, you might not get exactly what you're expecting. So if you asked something like, I'm trying to think of an example. We'll stay with what is holding me back in my life. You might get an answer, you might hear an answer, and that kind of gets into the different types of clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, or you might feel an answer, or it just might not show up for you immediately. You might hear nothing. And get a signal, the next day when you're walking around, or you don't know what you're going to get. So I really suggest setting some kind of intention that is, I want to know in this way, or please speak this to me, or tell this to me, or I would like to know right now. Because if you don't, you might find it later, or you might miss the sign entirely that your guides or the records are showing you. So specificity is helpful.
It makes such a big difference. So when we go to the Akashic Records, is there somebody there that we meet, or are we all alone?
Well, again, the human brain is really interesting. So yes, I have heard from many people that there are. I personally have not experienced this, but there are apparently people have reported seeing different guards that guard the Akashic Records, and people have interacted with them and spoken questions to them. So that is something that apparently people have experienced. I personally have not. And then also people, they have encountered some of their guides, spirit guides, angels, relatives, just, happenstance at the Akashic Records. But for most people, including myself, it has been more of a personal journey. And so now I want to get a little heady with you all in that, the Akashic Records aren't exactly a place. They're the way I can explain it is that they're in a different dimension. And so all this information is there. However, as humans, we don't really know how to experience this information from another dimension. So we interpret it in the way that we are comfortable with. And so for most of us, it's a record, a book, you're in a library, you're in a university setting. A hall of records is a really common thing that people see. So it's different for everyone. So you might see people there, you might not. You might see you're in a school, or some people have said, they've gone down, you're in the library and they're seeing all these rows of books until they find their own. Personally, I walked into a room that was in like a hall, if you will, and there was one book that was mine. So, we all experience it in different ways. So it's hard to say exactly who you'll see or what you'll see or how you'll experience it until you do it.
Well, when I followed your book's instructions, I actually went to a computer room. I guess everyone's doing it different. Oh,
I love that. Well, you must be more modern day than I. That's amazing. I love that.
Oh, well, so cool. Maybe they know I'm a little bit more visual, so I don't want to read it. Just, let's get through this, So.
Oh, that's so cool. I haven't heard that before, but it makes total sense. Oh, that's so cool.
So is it important that as we do this process that maybe we journal and keep track of our intentions?
I recommend it. I know some people love to journal and some people feel like it's like homework, but I think it is really helpful. At least, you don't have to write a ton down, but I think keeping track at least of your intentions and then what you received is really helpful. Personally, for me, both with Akashic Records or any kind of meditation or anything I'm doing, if I get a sign, a signal, an image, information downloaded to me in some way that I didn't, ask for, or I did ask for, I write it down. I think it's important to have, but it's also fascinating because I've been doing this for years now where, not everything makes sense right away. And maybe this happens, people dream journal similarly. You write everything down and you're like, that doesn't totally connect to my life right now. However, it may in the future. And so I've definitely had moments where I was like, wait, I think I got a sign about this, years ago. And I can look in my journal and see, yes, I did. And it makes sense to me now, but it didn't make sense to me then. So that's my biggest proponent for writing down your intentions and, keeping track of things, because it may not make sense to you now and you will want to know it in the future.
Well, Dina, I was real amazed that you also talk about like pop culture with the Akashic Records. I'm like, what? How does that come together?
Yeah, tell me about it. Well, that's just a little present from me, who's a pop culture nerd. That's my day job. So I had to include it somehow. But really, when I watch movies and TV shows, I'm constantly like shocked and love whenever I see things that are, tied to spirituality. Like Vanderpump Rules had a whole storyline about a Reiki master, and they had titles like, achy, reiki, mistakey, and things. Like, I am so obsessed when pop culture and spirituality somehow come together. So I'm constantly noting them in my mind always. So for the Akashic Records, of course, I had a bunch of examples that I wanted to include in this book. So for example, Prince, the artist, may he rest in peace, he definitely sings about the Akashic Records in his song Family Name. He actually doesn't sing about it. It's this robotic voice that introduces the song, but it's super cool. And that was like one of the first things I had ever heard mention of the Akashic Records, because, Prince was so ahead of his time, of course. But that was really cool. Let's see, Charmed on the WB had a whole episode about someone that had found the Akashic Records and was going to use them for evil, which, maybe it's not the most correct interpretation. I don't know that could ever happen, but it still was mentioned there. The show on Sci-Fi called Eureka had a whole storyline throughout multiple seasons about, quote unquote, the artifact, which was a reference to the Akashic Records. And then in general, like, I'm a bit of a Marvel movie head. I do love Marvel movies. And so in particular, Doctor Strange, I think, was really appealing to many of us spiritual people because of everything that it dealt with. So for one, they're constantly jumping in and out of the astral dimension, which is just so cool because that's where the Akashic Records are. And yeah, just a lot of allegory and spirituality throughout that entire movie, which I just absolutely loved. So those are just a couple of examples. There's many more and a couple more in my book. But yeah, it's fascinating how much it's permeated through pop culture without us even really maybe even knowing what it was.
Well, yeah, I love Doctor Strange too. And I love how they really brought that, the astral plane portion in and how he's studying on the other side, popping in and out. So it feels, more, when people look at this, it's more of a normal thing, but it's interesting because we have some cultures that maybe not to that extent, but they've been, going to the astral plane for, just thousands of years.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating. The ancient Egyptians, there's, record of that. Ancient Greek, like they talked about in ancient Greece, which I found was fascinating. Also just in general, like Akasha is considered an element in many different spiritual beliefs, which is like, it's considered to be like this aether. Maybe you've heard it's like the fifth element. And so that permeates through so many different cultures as well. So it's just, I don't know. Every time I find another connection to it, I'm like, that's fascinating. And especially now after the book is out, I'm like finding out about even more. I'm like, oh, I wish I knew that before this went to print. Like, it's just really fascinating how much it all ties together.
Yeah, how that all comes together. My goodness. And your book has so much information for people to get started, what to expect, the history. I love the pop culture part. Yeah, you've got so much great stuff in there. Was there anything that surprised you along your journey that you're like, whoa, I got to take a minute and think about this?
Actually, what comes to mind is, maybe this is the thing a lot of spiritual people are dealing with, the dark, the shadow. I feel like I I'm always all about the light, love and light, that's the thing. And so as I was doing, more and more research and talking to people who have had these experiences, I did begin to get a couple of warnings from people about making sure you're connecting with the right kind of entities. So this is for people who are, it probably also applies to if you're connecting with your guides and things. But I have heard some experiences from people who tried to connect with their star lineage and star families, and they connected with a dark being, if you will. So I included a little bit in the book about, how to check and just make sure that you're connecting with, people who are of the light and have your best intentions. And so to do that, it's setting intentions. And then if you connect with someone and you're not totally sure, you essentially just ask them, are you of the light? And they have to say yes or no. And that's how you would know who you're connecting with. And I don't want to share this to make anyone scared, but that definitely surprised me the most. Like I said, I think on all of our spiritual journeys, you kind of get to this point where you're like, oh, it's not all, butterflies and rainbows. Like there's a dark side, there's a shadow side. And I did not expect that with this. So, I'm realizing I'm talking about the Starseeds book. As we're talking about this, I'm so sorry, Marianne. That's just about my Starseeds books. But the Akashic book, I don't know what exactly surprised me, honestly. I'll have to think about that.
I know I kind of put you on the hot seat there, didn't I? No. Well, do you know, I find it fascinating because the thing is that is so true. And it's important to know what you're connecting with at all times. It's just like that saying, not all French are good cooks, not all people are all good. There's good and bad. And so it's just like how we have to discern who we spend our time with as far as friends and people that we surround ourselves with. We have to do the same thing energetically. And I found that very refreshing about your book because it is, talking about it's not something to be afraid of, but it's definitely a discussion that's being had. And it's letting people know, what, you should really kind of do your due diligence,
Right. Absolutely. I think like you nailed it, both energetically and in our everyday lives. Absolutely. And so, also with the Akashic Records, if you were nervous about, who you're going to see, like I said, you might run into some people up there. You can always ask for guidance for your guides. You can call in angels, whatever your protection of choice is, you can absolutely do that when you're doing a session. So don't fear, never fear. But it's just a part of reality. Like you're saying, we have to all deal with.
Yeah, I think starting off with your spirit guides and angels is probably a good way to go. So.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to just tap on them for a little help. Yes.
Well, do you know what? We all need a little help sometimes.
Exactly.
My goodness, Whitney. I just love your book. I thought it was so well done. Where can our listeners connect with you and just be part of your community and learn more about your book?
Thank you for asking. Well, you can find out more information always on my website, which is whitneyjeffersonevans.com. I'm on Twitter, even though I feel like we all have a love-hate relationship with Twitter, but I am on it and I love to connect with people. So on Twitter, I'm Twitney, Twitney. I love a pun. But yeah, there and my website are great places to start. I love talking to people about this information and just anything spirituality. So please come find me.
Well, Whitney, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Whitney. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Beginner's Guide to the Akashic Records, Understanding Your Soul's History and How to Read It. The Beginner's Guide to Akashic Records is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. If you'd like to connect with Whitney, you can again at whitneyjeffersonevans.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.